Holy goodness gracious, let's go.
It all goes quick.
Good evening, and welcome to the February 19th, 2025 Yarmouth Planning Board meeting. I am Joanne Crowley, Chair. This is to formally advise that as required by Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, paragraphs 18 to 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations, signed into law on June 16th, 2021, the Yarmouth Planning Board will hold a public meeting and hearing on February 19th, 2025, at 5:30 p.m. The public is welcome to attend in person this evening or via alternative public access provided on the notice of meeting available on the Town of Yarmouth website. I will begin by taking roll call. Susan Britta.
Here.
Deirdre Gaquin.
Here.
Will Rubenstein. Jim Saban.
Present.
Peter Slovak.
Here.
Ken Smith.
Here.
Joanne Crowley, present. Seeing that we have a quorum present, I'll now call the meeting to order and ask that you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item on our agenda this evening is to welcome our newest planning board member, Deirdre Gaquin. Deirdre, welcome. We have been wanting a seventh member for some time.
Well, it's wonderful to join you all, to meet you all, and love the town of Yarmouth. I've been a full-time resident for about 5 years, but I've been coming to this part of the Cape for all of my life. And I spent most of the last 50 years in Washington, D.C., working with statistical data about towns, and I have a master's in urban planning. So I'm just delighted to see if I can be helpful to Yarmouth, because I love the town.
Well, thank you so much. That's great. Thank you. And I know you've been involved with other important committees.
yes, I worked-
Library Study Committee.
Yeah, the Library Planning Committee the last few years, and I helped a little bit with the Open Space and Recreation data section.
I hear that Kathy tells me it was a little bit more than a little.
Okay.
It was very helpful.
Well, that's good to know.
Well, thank you, and welcome.
Thank you.
First item on our agenda this evening is a public hearing. I would now like to open the public hearing for the planning board regarding the application to approve a private road name change. I note the time as 5:35. Following the protocol for public hearings, I'll first read into the public record the public hearing notice that was published in the Cape Cod Times on February 4th and 11th, 2025. Hearing notice published in the Cape Cod Times on February 4th and February 11th, 2025. Public hearing notice, Yarmouth Planning Board. In accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 85, Sections 3A and 3B, the Yarmouth Road Name Change Policy 94-06, the Yarmouth Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, February 19th at 5:30 p.m. in the hearing room of the Yarmouth Town Offices, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth, Mass. 02664, and via remote access or via telephone at various sites on the town website. And to change the name of the private way known as Harold Road to Harold Lane. A copy of the application and locus map are available for review at the Planning Department, Yarmouth Town Office, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth, and Mass. 02664, during business hours, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on this matter should appear at the time and place designated. Written comments will be accepted and should be directed to the Planning Board, care of Kathy Williams, Town Planner at kywilliams@yarmouth.ma.us, no later than February 18th at 5 p.m. Yarmouth Planning Board Chair, Joanne Crowley. The applicant, Janet Drummy, is with us.
By Zoom.
Okay. Welcome, Janet. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'd like you now to talk a little bit about your request for this. The way that this public hearing will run out is that we'll hear the applicant's request. Kathy Williams, our town planner, has a planner memo that she sent to each of us. Perhaps, I hope that you've seen it, with regard to this proposed application. I don't see any members of the public here, but if they do have comments or questions on Zoom, we'll go through those first. And then if there were any written comments, Kathy, we'll go through those, and apparently there were none. Then we'll go through any questions the planning board might have, and then we will close the public hearing, and the planning board will deliberate and make a decision on your request. So why don't you open it up and tell us about Harold Lane, Harold Road?
Thank you. So my name is Janet Rummy. My husband and I have been homeowners in Yarmouth for about 42 years. We have the home on Harold Lane for 26 years. The sign has always been incorrect. The deed says Harold Lane, and the bills come in as Harold Lane. So it's a dead end. So my original intent was to try to get a sign that said dead end and no outlet, because there is no outlet. It just goes directly into a private property. And so I said to myself, since I want those signs, we might as well get the sign changed to say the correct name. So I submitted my request to Jeff Colby about a year and a half ago. We've been back and forth with all kinds of documents. And then he told me it had to be sent to the planning board. So I spoke with Kathy Williams a number of times, probably more today than any other day when I received the documents. So looking forward to having the name correct on the sign and to have the dead end and no outlet on the sign as well, because there's just a lot of traffic on that street where there's no place to go.
Thank you. I did want to mention, Janet, that we are aware of the back and forth and the fairly long length of time that you've been trying to get this moving, and we really appreciate your patience in going through this. It's probably been a little bit frustrating, but we're hoping to act in a way that will be favorable for you tonight.
Thank
We'll
you.
see. Any no written comments, Kath?
No written comments.
Any
except for
questions from?
emails of support that were included as part of the application from all the abutters.
Yes, we saw those, yep. Any questions from the planning board? Ms. Britta?
Is Jeff recommending there be two signs, or can you do one sign that says dead end and no turnaround, or do you have to have two signs? Is that,
The only thing that you guys are voting on this evening is the name of the street
Oh, the
name,
street,
because you're
okay.
responsible for naming or renaming of private ways.
okay.
Mr. Saban?
Yeah, I guess, which means that the subject of a dead-end sign is not relevant to the planning board. That's something that they can work with Mr. Colby on.
That's right.
And I hope you understand that.
Kathy told me that today, yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Other than I'm in favor.
Any other comments or questions?
That was a pretty straightforward request.
Okay. I'd like to then close the public hearing at 5:40.
Need a motion?
May I have a motion to close the
So
public
moved.
hearing?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I think I have right, 5:40, Kath? Okay. Discussion among planning board members. We have a motion that Kathy has prepared for us. If there aren't any other further questions or concerns? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the request to rename the private road called Harold Road in West Yarmouth to Harold Lane, with the condition that the applicant make all necessary changes at the Registry of Deeds with the address.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passed unanimously. Thank you so, she's gone?
Nope, she's-
Thank
I'm
you
here.
so.
Can
I'm
I
here.
just
Are
make,
you
a-
still here?
I am here.
Oh, good.
if I could just
We've
instruct,
passed unanimously.
Thank you very much.
And I think, Kathy, you have some paperwork for me.
Joanne's going to sign the paperwork that has the order to change the name of a way. That does need to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, because the planning department records show this as Harold Road. The assessor's map shows it as Harold Road, even though there's also the field card calls it Harold Lane. So there's confusions all over the place, so it
And
sounds like it.
the deed also says Harold Lane.
Right. At one point, as far as the planning board records were, it was Harold Road. So we do need to formally get this, get this recorded. I know that was a question that Janet had.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
So will I receive something from you?
Yes, and would I mail it to you, the
Harold Lane.
Harold Lane, or to your other address that's in the assessors?
Right, the other address, the billing address,
Okay.
please.
All right, sounds good.
So I
Thank
can,
you very
will I
much.
have something to sign tonight, Kathy? Great. So Janet, we'll take care of that this evening before we leave.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep, thank you. Thanks again for your
Bye-bye.
patience.
Bye-bye.
Next on our agenda are with regard to committee assignments. In our packets is a memo from our town administrator, Bob Rittenhour, regarding the town's new MPLCP post-grant award process. This has to do with our libraries. A planning board member is to be assigned to the new library building committee. Given this new assignment and the addition of a new planning board member, Ms. Gakin, I think it would be a good idea for us to take a fresh look at our assignments. Mr. Rubenstein is not with us tonight, and so I think I'd like to ask you if we can postpone this discussion until our next meeting on March 5th. He and Ms. Britta have expressed an interest in this, and others may think about it as well. So if it's okay with everyone, I think it best to just put it off until the 5th. We're not under any deadline for that assignment, are we, Kathy?
No, not to my knowledge.
It's just one more assignment. Deidre, if you don't know it, all of us are members of other committees. And some of us are members of several other committees. And it comes with the territory. So we try to do an assignment of committees at least once a year. And then as members come and go, we do some readjustments. In your packet, you can see where each of us are assigned now. And we're going to add the library building committee to that, and as part of that. So we'll put, if everyone's okay with that?
Yeah.
We'll put that off till next meeting? Okay, great. Next on our agenda, Kathy has provided a fair amount of information about the new ADU legislation that has now become a regulation.
Correct.
It is final, and I wanted to ask Kathy to run us through some of the high points on how this affects us after all of our hard work over 18 months to try to get something that the residents of the town of Yarmouth wanted. This is a little bit different.
Yeah, so this is a CMR similar to things like the Mass Building Code, Title V. So this is something that we have to regulate according to these regulations, but we do have some abilities to have some conditions within our local zoning bylaw as long as they are not unreasonable regulation. And the actual promulgated CMR 71 kind of goes through that a little bit. I just kind of wanted to go through and kind of, you all had seen the original draft, except for Deirdre, and then you had provided comments to the state on those drafts, and we got some wins and we got some losses, and I just kind of wanted to go over that very briefly with you. With regard to, I'm just going to do it on here. With regard to, we do have the ability to limit additional size restrictions, so we do have a minimum size for our accessory apartments, so that might be something that we can include, and we can also retain that restriction with regard to short-term rentals there under 71.02. At the bottom of the first page, they did change the definition of bus station, and it did eliminate those signaling the bus routes. So we had some concerns about that. So that was a win for us and probably for a lot of other communities who had concerns about having a bus station equal anywhere someone can get on and off of a particular bus. On the next page, halfway down on the gross floor area, we had some questions with regard to garages, and they did clarify that garages are excluded. And then they also did provide some additional clarification whether there's multiple principal dwellings on a property. Because remember, it's not just single families anymore. It could be duplexes or multifamily. That the gross floor area is based on the largest principal dwelling unit there. Going back down, they modified a little bit the definition of lot just to make sure that people understand it doesn't it can be a non-conforming lot. It doesn't have to be a conforming lot. Modular dwelling units, they eliminated that confusion that they had for the reference to Mass General Law. It really wasn't necessary, so they kind of took it out. Just basically said modular dwelling units couldn't be anything on a chassis, but the definition kind of said that already by saying it needed to be affixed to a foundation. Going on to-
Kathy, can I just ask
Sure,
one quick question on that?
definitely.
So when they struck a modular dwelling unit, not a manufactured home,
That was one of the questions that the planning board had was just confirming that means that tiny homes on chassis and mobile homes are
Right.
excluded. And I
Okay.
think they realized they didn't need to put that in at all because that's what it was saying. But the definition itself says it has to be on a foundation, already saying it's not on a chassis. So I think they realized they didn't need that extra language. It was just confusing for people.
yeah. Thank you.
Sure. So on the next page, protected use, ADUs, there was some question before whether if you had an ADU on your property already, but it was like 1,200 square feet, so it didn't technically meet the definition of a protected ADU, then you could still have a protected ADU in addition to that. I think, and this is something we need to clarify with town council, but my read on that is provided that only one ADU on a lot may qualify as a protected use ADU. So we want to confirm that this means only one protected ADU per lot, whether it's an existing ADU that you're now calling your protected ADU or whether it's a new one that you're putting on your property because you don't have an ADU there now.
Kathy, can I ask you, so does that still allow for 2 ADUs on a lot? It does.
I don't think it does, and this is a clarification. I wanted to talk to town council about it. Town council did send this out saying that they had some concerns still about this with regard to applicability. So that's something that I wanted to, both Mark Grills, the building commissioner who's enforcing all of this stuff, and I were going to talk to town council. I didn't get a chance to get to him before the meeting.
And what is the definition of a protected ADU? I know that was in the definition section at one point, but I couldn't find it.
That what I just read was from the protected ADU. It's on the top of like the third page.
Up here?
It's at the very top, yep. So it's just an attached or detached ADU that is located or is proposed to be located on a lot in a single-family residential zoning district.
Is
and
protected.
And is protected.
And is protected from
By
what?
Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 3, so the Dover Amendment, provided that only one ADU on a lot may qualify as a protected use ADU. An ADU that is non-conforming to zoning shall still qualify as a protected use ADU if it otherwise meets this definition. Very confusing.
Holy mackerel.
I agree. I agree.
Protected from what?
Yeah, what are we protecting them
Was the
from?
The
question?
use, by right use.
Right.
It's the by right use. So we did get a win on the single-family residential zoning district. They eliminated the section there that said a single-family residential dwelling would be anywhere where something's by right, special permit, variance, or waiver, or other zoning relief or discretionary zoning is approved. That would have meant it was everywhere. So they did do what we had requested, where we left it as allowed as a right or by special permit. So that was somewhat of a win. Some other edits that weren't necessarily significant, we get down to use and occupancy restrictions. This really basically eliminates any current restrictions that you have on what would be considered a protected ADU. So we have a lot of our ADUs which are family-related. We have very few, I think it's 3 or less, that are affordable restriction, but those things can no longer be enforced, those restrictions. So if someone had a family one, they could rent it out tomorrow to anyone that they want.
Do they,
House and the ADU could be corporately owned, is basically what that's saying. They don't have to live in it.
And you don't have to live in it, correct?
So that opens it all up to,
and does the owner have to legally, I mean, in the registry of deeds, aren't they listed as family? Is there some notation
They are.
legally somewhere?
They are.
They're
There are
affordable?
some some documents that are recorded at the registry.
Where there are
of
covenants
deeds, where there are
involved, right?
covenants
Yeah.
with regard to family-related. Our question was, does this negate all of that that's recorded at the Registry of Deeds? We have to do nothing to expunge that, and that really wasn't answered, other than them making the modification to this definition. So that's another question for town council.
I can see where someone who's trying to sell their property and runs through a title search it's gonna be a nightmare if these things aren't.
Well, their attorney would then say that is that considered a protected ADU, and it's covered under
Okay,
blanket
yeah,
blank.
okay.
Kathy, can I ask another question? Enrollment in an educational institution, I think that's new language. I don't think that was in the original,
Oh,
in the
You're right.
original edits. What does that mean? Why is that in there? After familiar relationship,
Yeah.
enrollment in an education institution, that's brand new, that's a new concept. So someone must have called them and said, we want college kids to be able to, I guess that, I don't know what that means.
well, you can't do it based on income or age or family relation or
But what is
enrollment in an
why would
educational institution.
what does that mean? Why is that in there?
Contingent? You can only stay in the ADU if you're enrolled at a school? There must be some place where that's happening in the
That's
state of
probably Some
Massachusetts.
towns that have,
Imagine
yeah,
in the city of Boston it's happening.
yeah.
Based on the characteristics of the relationship between the occupants, such as, but not limited to, income, I get that, age, enrollment in that I don't get at all. Could the town council do a little research and find out why that's in there? That's the first time that's been in there.
The income is just an
get that.
affordable.
Yeah, the rest of it
age
is
if
all-
it's seniors only.
Right.
Family relationship, I
Get
think
that,
that's, yeah, so the enrollment in educational institute, he may not know what that's from. That definitely came from some comments that
Yeah,
were
it did.
received. And I think Ken's right. It's in Boston where a lot of these ADUs, people may be using them while going to school. I mean,
That covers
that's what
quite a
eats up a
bit,
lot
too.
of rental. in-
That covers quite a bit, too. I mean, Dennis was going through the whole thing with they bought the nursing home. The nursing home was purchased by Hack, and it was protected under an educational use. So educational covers or protects quite a bit.
Yeah, it's another Dover Amendment protected. The zoning, I don't think that definition really was significant to us, or any changes there. Same with zoning district. Following page. They didn't change really anything of significance under the regulations of protected use, ADUs. Unreasonable regulations, I think they really did make a significant change at the top of the following page. Not there, but a little bit further down, under dimensional standards. Previously, they had said that we could, any requirements concerning dimensional standards such as setbacks, lot size, lot coverage, open space, and the bulk and height could be exactly as you have it for residential homes. So that, to me, meant, like, our minimum lot size for residential is 25,000. So does it only apply to lots that meet the current minimum lot size? But you'll see that they took out lot size and they added that additional, provided that a municipality may not require a minimum lot size for a protected use ADU. So that means protected use ADUs are allowed on any lot size. And this was really done for, Boston and all those other places where they probably have very, very small lot sizes. So we can still require the dimensional standards. So if you're adding on in order to put in an accessory dwelling unit, the use itself is by right, but you may trigger a special permit or something else if you can't meet the current setback requirements, the minimum setback requirements in our zoning bylaw. Again, that's something I want to confirm with town council. So there may be people who are still getting caught with special permit because they have a super small lot and they're pre-existing non-conforming lot or non-conforming structure, but they need to scooch into the setbacks in order to have a secondary means of egress or in order to build something.
If the ZBA provided relief for a setback previously, would that relief also apply going forward to an ADU, a change of use?
I think it would, unless, I don't know, if there's some special permits that specifically say, I believe as a condition, that the garage cannot be converted without coming back.
Right.
I think that might be something that's governed, but if you had something that was a garage and there was no restriction on it, you could probably convert it as a pre-existing non-conforming structure. As long as you're not doing anything more non-conforming. Yeah, it could be interesting.
That's a really tough one, because more non-conforming, just take it from a septic situation, you know?
You'll have to meet Title V.
They'll have to
though.
meet Title V requirements, since, you know, and if you make something that they get a variance for setback, well, there's no variance for sewage setback, or septic setback. So,
We get sewer, then it,
that's a totally different story, but on the residential side, it's gonna be a while before they see those.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think you might be able to build it, but can you, can you put a septic system in is a whole separate subject.
And you can't get a waiver for that either.
No,
No.
that's my point.
how far away are we for sewering south of 28, all those little 5,000 square foot lots?
It depends on what Phase 2 ends up being. Do we want to go south of 28, or do we want to go north and start hitting some of our Zone 2 areas where we know we have some issues with
I
water
thought
quality?
That's something as a planning board, we need to start looking at it, because we can't use septic as an excuse to restrict zoning, because now they're gonna have sewering. So I think over the next couple of years, we better start trying to figure out how we're gonna deal with that. Because once it starts coming, then it's gonna be,
Septic won't be an excuse.
Right.
exactly.
I think a lot of the parcels south of Route 28 are in a floodplain
Right.
as well. So if you're converting something in your existing home, you're probably staying below the 50%, but if you were trying to create a new ADU, you might have to make sure that that meets all of the standards, which could be very expensive with regard to floodplain.
And very difficult,
building
right.
code. Right. So that's something that, again, might impact.
Difficult as one would think.
Okay. The next item down there just indicates that the town can't require separate utilities for the ADU. And then moving down, they added something at the end of the page there, number 8, historic districts. They basically said that historic districts can have stricter requirements, but as long as they're not considered unreasonable, which I was surprised to see that. They must have had a lot of
Well,
comments on that,
Yeah.
yeah, especially
Decide what's unreasonable.
Yeah.
ZBA?
the courts.
Courts.
Ultimately, I would
So the
think. it would-
process would be that it would go through the ZBA and then appeal to the courts after that.
If you didn't get what you want, yeah.
Well, the historic districts, it's Old Kings Highway, which is different. I mean, that's not zoning board of appeals. That has their own rules and.
They do.
The next item, 9, was a little, it was talking about pre-existing non-conforming structures. A municipality may not prohibit the development of a protected use ADU in an existing structure or principal dwelling or lot due to non-conformance that could be used for or converted into a protected use ADU in conformance with the building code. To me, not prohibited means
Allowed.
no, but that's the question to town. Not prohibited, can it be a special permit? Prohibited to me means it's a variance if you want to do it. Not prohibited, so that's another question that I had for town council. What does the not prohibited mean? I talked to Mark about it briefly, and he said, yeah, that's one we should run by Jay Tellerman and see what he has to say on that one.
'Cause I agree with Susan with that. Not prohibited to me means it's allowed.
Yeah. But
Shall
I think in
versus may.
zoning terms, not prohibited means it's a hard no.
Right. Not prohibited means it's not a hard no, it's a yes.
It's double negatives that kill.
Well, it's allowed, but you got to get a special permit.
Right, that's the way it's
So it's a
gonna,
It's allowed, but you have to, it's not allowed by right.
right, that's the question.
Yeah,
That was a
okay.
tricky little not
Okay.
prohibited
There was a
versus,
question mark at the
yeah.
end of
They like to do these weird double negatives and this type of thing. So going down on the next page a little bit, short-term rentals, municipalities may establish restrictions and prohibition on short-term rentals. Our short-term rental section specifically says ineligible are accessory apartments. So we say in a different section than this that you can't have that. So that's good that we have that in place already. Special permits for multiple ADUs. A municipality can choose to allow additional ADUs beyond the one on the same lot as a protected use ADU, and it must be done through special permit. We specifically limited ADUs to one per lot.
Right.
This sounds like one thing, but we could keep that and simply say in our part of our zoning bylaw that we're limiting it to one unit. They also talked a little bit more about floodplain and aquifer protection overlay districts, that you can require special permit for development of protected use ADUs in floodplains or aquifer protection overlay if required for the principal dwelling. We don't have anything other than building code and our conservation commission if you're doing in the floodplain. And that particular use really wouldn't have an impact on our aquifer protection. Title V obviously has its own set of rules that would govern a lot of that.
But
And then, of
when
course,
you, when you, sorry, Kathy.
Sure.
What about the Zone 2 for us? And that.
I'm just saying that still applies.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
all of the state and federal, and they actually state that in here very clearly. Fire regulations, building codes, Title V, all still apply. Mark's been saying, people have been coming in saying, yeah, building code doesn't apply. The Affordable Homes Act told me I didn't have, and he's like, no, that's not what it says. It says the use is allowed. You still have to adhere to all these other requirements. And I think that's the confusing part for people, the whole statement by right.
Right.
People think, oh, it's a wild, wild west,
I can do
free-for-all,
whatever I
and it's
want,
not.
right.
It's just the use that's can't be regulated.
And also, the narrative that's developed because of this, they mix use with requirements. They've mixed use with dimensional requirements and things like that. So there's a lots of times the conversation starts as a use conversation, ends up as a dimension conversation. And that is confusing to people. But the whole thing is confusing, but.
Yeah, just because the use is allowed doesn't mean how you've designed it on your site is
Exactly.
allowed by right.
Exactly, yep.
And of course, number 7, they want to make sure that, let you know that you can certainly adopt regulations that are more permissive. So you can say 5 feet from the property line. And I'm sure there's some,
No side yard setbacks.
yeah, it's like, right, like 10 foot instead of 20 foot or whatever. You could do that to if you were interested in that as a community and trying to tuck them in the back. And then just saying, a lot of the questions had to do with, well, how do you address these? And they just clarified that it shall be addressed consistent with the most current address standard publications. Our engineering department assigns addresses in combination with police and fire.
So it could be then 123 Main Street, and then the ADU is 123A?
I'm not exactly sure how they do that.
Okay,
right
but they
now.
will be different.
They will be distinctly different so that the fire department will know when they get a call which structure they need to go to, or the emergency services.
The side of the building that's on fire.
I know, I said emergency services after I realized that, because I'd like to think that they would see what the problem is there, but,
It came up actually in a homeowners meeting that I went to, that had, the people have beach rights. And the beach rights are tracked by address, not by the owner. And the question came up, if they do an ADU, will the ADU have eligibility to use the beach?
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I thought, and I had thought, because from, I think one of our discussions ages ago was about mail, and I thought, I sort of recalled, and I said, I thought they were gonna have 2 different addresses. And if they have 2 different addresses, only the address in the homeowners association is allowed to use the beach, not the ADU. But that was just me thinking, gee, I remember talking about this. But that could be a big issue with beach associations.
Most likely, that's gonna be like corner lots where it's 123 Smith Street,
Right.
and the
other
other
side
side
is
of the house,
Main
it's
Street.
ABC Jones
Right.
Drive.
Right. Yep.
I think mainly it's to keep the confusion from emergency responders and that type of thing.
I think you want to go to room A. So, and then data collection, yikes.
Estimated value of construction.
They're asking for a
exactly what it's
lot of
for.
data. And this is something that, Mark will have to see what we can get out of OpenGov and making sure that somehow this data is being collected with OpenGov so we can run a report on just ADUs. And it's all the information they need is there. And they've really changed it to, you have to provide it if requested versus you have to submit it annually. So I thought that was interesting. like building commissioners don't have enough stuff going on. The one thing that I don't think was truly answered in any way was the question with regard to separate ownership. In my opinion, they're called accessory dwelling units, so they need to be accessory to something, accessory to the principal. So that I would say, and I would run this by town council, but I think our no condominiumization, no separate ownership is something that we should still continue. So we have some work to do. Planning board has some work to do. Mark and myself and town council has some work to do. They're supposed to be working up, you really couldn't have done anything until we had these regulations. And I know that a couple other towns are trying to do, I know Dennis is trying to get something. And obviously Barnstable has much more flexibility with the town council form of government. But this is something that I think we would be looking for fall. Special town meeting, just to make it easier for Mark. It might be a lot of work to get people to understand why we're changing the bylaw.
We can't get this all done in a month?
No.
Kathy, can I just double? So this red line version was submitted by the state, correct? These are all there, all right, so I would have to assume that anything in here advantages the state, not the municipalities. The restatement of things that we're allowed to keep are things we already had. They didn't give us anything new.
Well, they backed down on some things like the definitions.
Oh, whoop.
Big whoop. But yeah, I mean, they were, the first comment I think we had was that you're really expanding this jurisdiction of that Affordable Homes Act with your definitions. And I think they kind of heard that loud and clear. And they did kind of back off and realize that, I don't know whether that would have sustained a legal challenge based on what was passed, based on some of the definitions and the expansion. So more work to do with that for special town meeting.
Kathy, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
You touched on it. I was going to ask about it. You said that have it ready for town meeting. What are we having ready for town meeting in the fall?
A revised section of the zoning. We would start calling it accessory dwelling units instead of accessory apartments. But then I think you're going to, just like the building code, you're going to be referencing this CMR very heavily with the following exceptions. And these are the things that we specifically, with town council, have agreed is not unreasonable to regulate in Yarmouth.
So
Are
with the-
reasonable to regulate, did you say, or unreasonable?
That's not unreasonable to
Oh,
regulate.
okay, not unreasonable, okay.
With the
reasonable.
base-
Negative view. That's reasonable to regulate.
With the basis of putting this back out for a vote at town meeting?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, as we all remember, the vote was pretty close last time.
Yeah,
8 votes.
8 votes.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying, is like, we have to do some work to convince people that we're just trying to mesh our regulations and keep what we want. We're literally keeping as much as we possibly can.
But,
So
That's where I'm going with all this, is we keep everything we want, we bring it to town meeting in the fall, and it's voted down, then what happens?
Then there's just a big ugly section in our bylaw that's unenforceable.
Okay?
And just
the one we passed last year would be unenforceable.
certain sections of it, like owner occupancy, unenforceable. Requiring 2 parking spaces, unenforceable.
So really, these are administrative edits to our existing bylaw based upon the,
That's what I was trying to understand, Jim.
yeah, I think if we approach it as these are administrative edits to conform with the Commonwealth's.
Yeah, although the impact is hardly administrative. I mean, the impact is enormous.
Oh, yeah, the whole, but there's nothing we can do about that. I mean,
Well,
it
I
is-
wouldn't say that. There's never nothing you can do about it. We can always, but I think Ken's got a real good point. Remember how the community really did get involved with this? And there were a few notions that the community would very adamant about. One, of course, was owner occupancy, so that we wouldn't have the corporations going in and buying up a whole side, a whole side of the street. That was one of the unifying things that everyone thought was a great idea. Now, that doesn't hold anymore.
And I don't think
Parking
if
as
we
well,
can,
right.
I mean, we could always try to make the argument, but I think the response from Boston is going to be, you're one of 301 communities.
I
And you
know.
know what? I can't,
Yeah.
micromanage this to a point that, we're sorry, but this is just the way it is. I think that's going to be the response you're going to get. But I think my bigger concern is that if we don't get it passed at town meeting, a lot of our bylaw is basically unenforceable. So we've got to try to work to get that message out there that this is why we need to do these. But the other question I have is, how many are we, you'd mentioned Mark is already getting inquiries. Is he getting a lot of them?
I'd have to double check with him, but it definitely picked up.
Yeah.
It definitely picked up.
Oh, yeah, because it's the Wild Wild
People are
West.
aware of it, and
He's had a lot of, I spoke to Mark about it like a week ago, I was curious, and he's had a fair amount of requests already, just, people are staying informed of this,
Yeah.
But again, they think they can do it without meeting building code.
That's
So they're
right.
not that informed.
Well, the information that's been put out
As a
there
whole.
is, like you said, it's the wild, wild west. People think they can do whatever they want.
Well, I mean, you hear things like, whatever size lot you have, you can build on it.
Right.
If you can get the set, that is the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something, how difficult, now, Jim, you've been around a long time, maybe you know the answer.
what do you mean?
In terms of listening to these, how
old.
difficult, if, worst case scenario, it does not pass, and we're left with a bylaw that's unenforceable, what does that mean for the town? I mean, what kind of a burden does that put on, like, Mark and does that mean they have to go to zoning to get relief? Does zoning still play a part? Is Mark then forced to issue a permit? I mean, how does that work?
What would happen is we would work with town council to identify what portions of this could reasonably be enforced and what would need to be struck. And Mark would use that along with the CMR to make his ruling. If somebody disagrees, they could appeal the building commissioner's decision to the zoning board of appeals. And if they upheld it, then they could, appeal that. And that's how things might get to the court systems. But I think Mark's trying to be, he's always very fair.
Yeah.
But I think working with town council, we would literally redline it, so to speak, for his version of it, of what he would enforce and what he couldn't enforce.
I think it's how we sell it to the public, how we're bringing this back to the floor.
It's going to be a hard sell, because we had a lot of people that knew and supported the final product.
Right.
And how do we say to them, no, we think it's a good idea that GE can come in and buy up your entire street?
I think one of the things we need to
don't
do
say
is,
that.
once,
We don't say it's right.
Madam Chair, I think,
Yes.
once Kathy can identify the changes, we can then identify what areas we're going to have pushback on and be able to discuss those in detail. By right, special permit obviously is hey, wait a minute. So once we know what those details are that we have an idea we're going to get pushback on, then we can educate the public the pros and cons of those. I think that's kind of where we need to just kind of wait and see what, Kathy puts together for changes, and then we can talk about how we can.
Who thought we were going to be doing educational lessons on ADUs again?
Huh.
I know, yeah.
Yeah. I think the one thing is if it's by right, it might only be a majority. It may not be a supermajority, so that helps us.
Well, yeah, that would help.
Okay.
And we can take advantage of organizations that can, why I was late was I was on a Zoom meeting with Housing Assistance Corp on advocacy and how the sausage is made at the planning board level, but those types of organizations are the ones that we can certainly reach out to and assist us in getting those changes and
For support.
message of, of support for what we're trying to do.
Okay, next on our agenda is an update on the local comprehensive plan.
As you all know, and Joanne has heard the wonderful news that we had a very successful community meeting on January 29th. I've heard nothing but positive things about it. People were very energized. I think some of the reporting out that we got was very interesting comments. I'm not going to get into that a lot tonight because BSC Group is working on compiling a summary like they did for the open house that should be available for our March 5th meeting, and we can go over it in more detail. I just wanted to give kudos to everyone. I thought everyone did a great job, and it was really well attended and well reviewed.
Great.
By chance, I don't think we actually asked it, but did we make note of the demographics of the I mean, we had a great deal of people participating, but I was kind of curious after I left what the demographics were. What is there
I
are we reaching anybody under the age of 50?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I know that in our group, you know, it's still, I mean, our average age is 55. So that's the average age of our constituency, so to speak. But I know I had some younger people in my group in the other room. I know there's a young woman who has a business who was in one of the groups. So I've hopefully tapping in a little bit to the schools has helped us. We've had a good relationship with them, has helped get some more people out about it. But we don't have any statistics on that.
It's a great turnout, though.
Yeah, it was a really good turnout. My group was half North Side residents and half South, well, yeah, Susan, you were with my group, and, you know, half South Side, but under 50, no. Not in my group.
Not mine either. Half of them were from my neighborhood. Like, go sit somewhere else.
Anything else on that, Kath?
Nope.
Thank you. Next up, Matakees Use Committee.
Yeah, lots of things going on that. The housing group has had the fortune of being able to use Barrett Planning as part of a regional housing initiative where we had access to 30 hours of a consultant, which happened to be Barrett Planning, is a very well-known, well-established firm. But Karen Green had a great idea of hiring them to do the economic section to facilitate the first 3 meetings of the economic section for the MUC. So they had their first meeting it was just the chamber and businesses. It wasn't with CEDC on February 12th. I think they asked a couple different questions, but obviously, what were some of the things that are priority needs for the businesses in the chamber? And they're talking about nothing that we haven't heard before, you know, enticing, you know, younger people, different generations to come to the Cape. We want to increase our commercial tax base. We want to have more shoulder season events. We want to have more things for people to do when they get here. And then concerns about workforce and seasonal housing. When asked what might be the best uses for it, there's a very strong support for some type of sports complex with indoor-outdoor sports fields, and that can also be a convention center. This will really something, because they were really looking for something that could draw people year-round and draw a younger crowd year-round. And with a lot of these youth tournaments, you are drawing a lot of young people. I know that's something that Jim was interested in.
Me too.
So it seemed to be very well supported. Paul Nitzwicki, who's the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, was also in attendance, and he reiterated that there's really a big gap on Cape Cod for that right now. That was really reiterated in the recreation MUC meeting that happened that evening on the 12th, where all the different leagues and groups came together. I was astounded with the number of programs that are out there. I don't have young children, but it's just an astounding, and having access to an actual indoor gym has exploded their programming. I think it was over 1,000 kids in the last year have just been using the Matakees site, the indoor gymnasium. They even use some of the band rooms in the back for crafts and, you know, different types of programming there. And then we also talked about the different needs for fields and how they have very limited access to the actual fields for soccer, baseball, even softball, senior softball league. And that there's also the need to rest fields occasionally, so you can't just keep wearing them out. So when you have even one field that's being rested, the number of fields in the town of Yarmouth is very, very low. So their emphasis was more on generating more recreational facilities for use by town and the town residents, or maybe in combination. I know that they do some students with Dennis also have been participating in our programming as well. So there's a little bit of a different twist there. Is it some type of sports complex that some independent person comes in and generates that somehow we get to retain some type of access to, or is this a municipal recreational access asset that we then rent out field time to different groups and that type of thing?
It could be
Kathy,
both.
how-
It could be both.
Housing was a big part of that conversation, though, too. I listened to this today on the way back in the car, listened to the meeting.
Oh,
So
yes,
it was
for
a 10
housing.
a.m. meeting last week. So, I mean, the first 4 or 5 people, I mean, housing came up a lot.
Yeah, workforce and seasonal housing.
Housing for J1, year-round housing. So, I mean, it came up quite a bit. It was a big part of it.
Yep, I'm sorry if I didn't mention that. That was workforce and seasonal housing was certainly one of the things, the priority needs that they did have. But I think people at least in the chamber and the business, were like, if we could create an awesome sports complex here, it may be worth having all of that together on one site and look for maybe some other locations for housing if there's not the ability to do all of it together. One other thing is they are doing a field and facility assessment, the recreation department, so that they can identify what their actual field needs are. And that's being done by Weston and Sampson, who also did our open space and recreation plan. So hopefully, even though there seems like there's a lot of fields in town, a lot of them we don't have access to because they're at the intermediate school, they're at the high school, and we don't have any access to that for our programming.
Kathy, was the summer baseball league part of that conversation? Were they?
No.
They weren't at all, because there's a big opportunity right
For
there
who?
for the summer baseball league.
They have a contract, I think, with the school system to be able to utilize the field. Matter of fact, I think at this town meeting, isn't there some money to put a.
Right, to
warning
expand the
track?
field, yeah,
So
okay.
I think they're pretty entrenched with playing right at DY and probably not interested in, I mean, I don't want to
Although
speak for
I
them,
was,
but-
with the short time that I was on the recreation committee, I know that they always wanted to have some of these summer tournaments. And the reason they couldn't was that we did not have whatever regulation size field they need, which would be a great summer activity to generate income during the summertime. They have these tournaments and players come down, and so I would certainly be interested in their opinion. Maybe someone could.
Senior softball was a huge thing, which I was surprised, and they,
I have an employee, Kathy, that's going to a senior softball tournament in Iowa in August, and there's 700 teams from around the nation going to this one tournament out in Iowa. I don't know how big the complex is, I have nothing to compare it against, but there's a huge need for this, and I think there's a huge revenue driver for the town, and I'm glad to hear that at least they're thinking about something like that. I'm on the open space muck committee, and we're having our first meeting on Thursday, next Tuesday. And I'm looking forward to at least expressing that piece of it, that I'd like to see something happen like that.
It's a huge opportunity I mean, no town on the Cape has an opportunity like this to develop a property that can be beneficial not only to the town, but to the county as a whole. I mean, Brewster had their property, but they didn't do anything but for the people of Brewster. If we would look at, recreation and I mean, we don't have a convention center anymore. We don't have a place to put 10,000 people.
That's right.
So I think to my line of thinking, those are the ways, and you can always find other places for housing, and it seems to be that 300 units on Route 28 seems to be some people's answer, but
Yeah, and don't scare anybody off, Jim. I don't believe we're looking to put 10,000 people in one spot.
no, I don't misunderstand, but
But I do absolutely agree with you that there's an opportunity there for a venue of some sort that would be a revenue driver, not only for the town of Yarmouth, but for the county, too. Completely agree with that, Jim.
now whether we run it by the town or we hire a private corporation or something to run it, that would be a whole other issue. Preferably, me, let somebody else run it and just give us a check.
You're putting out what I'm saying, yeah. Let somebody else do
And
it.
I'm assuming,
And give
Jim,
us a check.
That's right.
and Jim, I'm assuming you're talking about like an all-year-round thing, like we could have hockey tournaments, things, not just summer stuff.
I
but
don't
we
think,
could have.
Susan, I don't think you need, ice. We have ice on the Cape and facilities. I'm talking, yes, year-round, indoor fields. There's indoor field hockey, there's indoor soccer. There's a facility up in Marlborough. Both my daughters played field hockey, and they would play indoor
Indoors,
field hockey.
yeah.
And you'd go up there in the middle of January,
Right.
and you'd be amazed. If anyone finds themselves in the Marlborough area, swing by. I don't remember the name of the complex now, but it's an amazing complex.
But we'd be promoting a 12-month, a year-round.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have indoor pickleball, you could have basketball tournaments. you could have all
Anything,
kinds of-
virtually anything you do outdoor now on a field, you can do indoors. Virtually anything.
Yeah, the one thing, Bill Scott was at the meeting, he mentioned, I think it was, we'll have to run sewer to make anything work. Was there any more discussion as to when or if or?
No, I think he is looking at things like MassWorks grants for the possibility of extending the sewer and infrastructure up there. I think it's a function of what we ultimately settle on. If we settle on something really small, we may not want sewer, but if you have something that has a higher demand, we want to protect our wells, we might want to bring sewer up there. So it's all a function of what gets decided ultimately.
Maybe you can answer this question, Peter. The CDC and the chamber are on parallel tracks, and then you guys are going to come together for a single CDC chamber? I mean, I'm looking at the calendar, that there's a reconciliation and that, so,
Let's
know how
see,
that's
so we tried to make the first meeting work together, and it didn't happen, so they had their meeting separately at 10 a.m., which
You
wasn't
say
a
they, do
great-
you mean the chamber or the?
The chamber and the business community. So we'll have a meeting, we'll have our meeting, CADC will have the meeting a couple weeks. And I believe they're welcome, they're certainly welcome to come. But I think it won't be until probably the third meeting, when maybe all the ideas are funneled to 3. I think that's the goal. What are
Okay.
the 3 ideas that the committee is going to put forth?
okay.
So they're parallel, I suppose.
But in the end, it will be a cooperative CEDC chamber proposal? Or is the chamber going to have a separate
yeah,
number
be
one,
cooperative.
and you guys are going to have a separate number
The
one?
way it was described,
Yeah.
you know, the committees, the groups come together, the people and everybody, and it's supposed to be 3. There's only going to be 3 ideas that come out of it.
Out of that group?
Right.
Okay.
But I think that's the same for everybody, right? Just 3 ideas from every group?
I believe
Yeah,
so.
it's just that the chamber is involved, where the other committees, like I'm on housing,
Right,
we're just housing.
right.
We don't have hack in there. We don't, and maybe we should, because I know that there's been some,
Been invited.
they've been invited, they have.
Well, that's why I mentioned the housing, because it came up quite a bit, and I understand why. There was, hotel people, restaurant people, so, the housing part of their business is a big, need and concern. But I mean, it certainly, housing isn't part really of the economic development, although it is. It's sort of more of a, maybe point for the housing committee to make.
Yeah.
But just to be
versus the-
clear, housing is not economic development.
Thank you,
Housing is
Susan.
housing. Economic development, no, it is, no, it is. I mean, in this town, it's become, we tend to conflate them. But if you look at it from a money point of view,
Right.
housing is not economic development. Housing is housing. It can be part of an economic development discussion, but it shouldn't be considered economic development, because it really isn't. It does not create revenue.
One of
But
the,
I think it's a spoke in the wheel,
It is. It is.
without it, you don't
But it's
get,
not-
if you don't have
correct.
housing to, house your employees, then you don't get
But,
economic
we've been
development. So
talking about
it's
housing
kind of a,
employees for 50 years. We've paid, look at Route 28. Look at all the spots on 28 that even 10 years ago, Jim, were in housing for employees. Now everything is housing, housing, housing. There's no conversation about economic development. And the housing is not, it's,
well, I don't disagree. I
It's not
mean, if
private
you look at
sector
the
housing.
300-plus units that we're putting on 28, how much mixed use have we, and maybe that's on us to say, hey, no, we want, when the Cavalier comes, don't, say, okay, you don't have to have mixed use.
right.
We say, no, you will put mixed use in. But again, when we start looking at the future, I think we talked about this before, what is the future of the business community? With technology today and, retail, do you want to put a shopping center in there where nobody goes shopping? So I think that's part of the discussion that, as a community,
kind of
and I
economic
think this,
development?
I think what's very important is, with the LCP, we can start to get some visions as to what people want.
Right.
We're all, well, at least I'm dead and gone, but.
And I just, the housing part of it is, what is it, the housing assistant, no, housing authority has 18 acres behind, available for housing, right? So why do we need to put housing here?
Forest Road?
Forest Road? Yeah. If we already have places it can go, or should go.
Oh, they're also talking about the school out front of Mattakese eventually rolling that onto Station Ave. I look at it this way, there's a great opportunity for housing right there, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's 70 acres? 70 acres. 70 acres. So, I mean, with the right vision, you can do a little bit of everything there.
Right.
Although a
You
lot
can
of-
still provide housing and still do, your sports fields and even the convention type meeting
It could
facility.
be, it could, as you say, it could be a spoke in the wheel, but I don't think it should be the hub. I think this should be an economic development opportunity of which housing plays a role, but it is not a housing development project.
Well said, Susan.
I really think this is, as you said, we've all said repeatedly, This is about the last big chance this town is gonna have to develop something that can generate revenue for the town.
It can change the whole,
Yeah, so we're at 92,
Communities,
we're like
the
90,
vision
10
of
now.
our-
We need to develop economic opportunity in this town, which will create jobs, good-paying jobs, so that people can buy houses, and we can stop the conversation about, let's do subsidized housing. If we have people who have good jobs, they'll be able to buy housing. And that part of the conversation does not get enough attention. But this is an opportunity that we'll never get again.
no, I think if we do it right, one of the things that we talked about was the town lacks an identity, if you will. Whereas if you would do this in a way that, I'll use, because I still think it's a great idea, is the sports complex mentality of taking advantage of all the recreation facilities we already have in place, adding this on top of it. Well, now we've got an identity as a recreation mecca or of some
Right.
sort.
Right.
And it starts to give the town an identity that right now, I think our identity is mini golf and
The
pirates.
water park. The water park and mini golf. And of course, we're gonna get the drive-in site in there as a
And it's called Parker's River Landing.
park. Thank you. But that's the kind of thing, you do it piece by piece. But, the conversation on this site should be way more focused on economic development than housing.
And not to put a fly in the ointment, but it took us 18 months to get accessory dwelling unit bylaw done.
I know.
Imagine what's going to happen when they come up with the final suggestions as to what, no matter what it is, it's going to be a war.
Right.
I don't care what it is. 'Cause
That
not
is-
everybody's going to like whatever,
They say that, living in a free society, you pay a big price for that.
Oh, yeah.
And this is democracy. People are gonna get an opportunity, and something will shake out.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully, the vast majority will agree with it.
Meeting minutes?
No.
I say, did I miss those?
I think
Okay,
just
so-
just a quick comment on Peter's comment is, I think some of the other groups, like with regard, even housing, they even commented on how they felt that the gym and the auditorium had a lot of benefit to the town and they would like to keep it. So if there's other things that aren't necessarily your view that you think are important, I think there's like even a place on the form there to talk about those things. And I know that the housing committee did do that.
The Housing Committee went on a tour, and we weren't supposed to get inside, but we did. I couldn't make it, but the report back at the Housing Committee meeting, people were amazed at, first of all, the condition of the gym and the auditorium isn't so bad, which I wanted to just make one comment about the Axios report. I was disappointed they didn't look at each building.
Yeah.
They looked at the systems. They looked at the electrical systems, the roof system. Whereas if you looked at buildings A, B, C, D, and D, and E, I think, there's 5, plus the gymnasium and auditorium, they were amazed at the condition, and that they're being used. The auditorium and the gymnasium are clearly being used, and the music room. So those segments of the building appear to be less deteriorated than the rest. The rest is apparently a mess. And I was disappointed that they didn't segment the building into the buildings.
I think the Muck had the same comment.
I just,
I think you still is an opportunity to look at it in more detail. One of the comments I had was, well, if it's going to cost X amount of money, and just to let you know that the building assessment has been completed and it is on that Matakey utilization project website, on the town website.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot my train of thought.
they had an estimate in there that, renovation or upgrade would be like $41 million.
Thank you.
And did not include ADA requirements.
But it also, I was like, okay, if it costs $41 million to bring it up to just to base level, that doesn't mean then you would add all the costs to turn it into housing or all the costs to turn it into office. But what's the cost to just demo that building? That's not
That's not in there?
inconsequential.
See, that should be.
That's not, and we're working on that. I think they're trying to steward the very limited resources that they have. So
that
they're kind
kinda-
of doing things little piecemeal. But Roby, who's part of the Roby Whitehouse, who's the assistant DPW director, and she does all of the demolition and construction waste. She's like, that's a concrete building. That's not going to be really easy, A, to take down, and then B, to get rid of.
Is there asbestos in the building?
I'm sure there's asbestos
It was
in
built
there.
back in the
Enormous
60s.
cost to
It was
it.
built in 19, let's see.
70
six-
something?
Yeah, 60-something, well, I was the first seventh grade class there, so.
So it almost might, it might even have to be tented to contain the,
So that's something, I think they're going to be looking at a cost for demolition. So you can compare, it may cost this to fix it, but if it costs half of that to demo it, maybe that changes the thoughts a little bit on what to do with it.
Kathy, do you have any idea of when the municipal group is going to meet?
No, but I did mention your name to Bill, and he did acknowledge that you're on the team.
Meeting, because
Yeah,
we have a lot to say.
yeah. I'm not privy to when that is. This is, the group will involve the first meeting only. These issues are the purview of the select board. So I think that they're talking about, does the library go there,
Who is this, the municipal group?
yeah, I think they're
I'm
talking
on that
about
group. I
municipal
never heard
services.
that. Have we
No,
met?
you haven't met. I'm just saying, this is the type of things that will be discussed.
Oh, okay, okay.
So in the project website, on the town website, there's a link in our minutes, in our agenda, and I went into it. All of these updates are in there. What Kathy's saying, it's all part of the team's update that Bill put together and what the various teams are doing. Recreation is working on with a consultant for a fields plan. Well, that'll be interesting to see what they come up with. But municipal looks like it's being deferred to some kind of wait for the selectmen to tell you when to have a meeting. That's the way I'm reading it.
Why would they think that?
No. I think they're going to meet and have some brainstorming session, but I think ultimately what they're saying is any municipal use or entity that would go there is at the purview of the select board to decide.
We get that,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
get that.
Okay.
That should not stop the committee from meeting.
Oh, I don't think it is.
But you're right, they are
We're
going
not
to
gonna clear
establish.
Right, we're not going to clear what we say with the board. We're going to give it to the muck people. That's what we're there to do.
I mean, I apologize, it did say establish possible ideas for the municipal group, okay.
And
but
you
I-
may find that you get all the different, you go down from the brainstorming to the 3 ideas to the 1 idea that could be bigger and smaller version of that same idea. And it may end up, one gets picked over another, and something may not happen at all based on a group. Or we may try some options. They want to come up with 3 concept plans after all the mucks have come up with their proposals. Muck team members have come up with their proposals. They'll have 3 different concepts that are going to be developed. We are working on hiring the muck consultant. The proposals are in, and I think we're narrowing down on a consultant for that.
Is there an RFP out for that yet?
It's already opened, bids have been opened, so it's still an active negotiation, so I can't say, but it's looking good.
Okay, next, no meeting minutes. Any committee updates? Or Peter?
Sorry.
Go ahead,
I was
Peter.
gonna.
I always feel like I have
mean,
my back to you, Peter. I
CD, that's okay.
apologize.
CDC special events last night. We had a new one. I know a lot of you have some CDC experience, but Cultural Center got some money. But we also had a bike ride, a new event coming in, and I can't remember the name of it, so I feel horrible, but it's in September. No, that came up, but it's something different. It's similar to The Last Gasp.
Oh, how
Sort of-
cool.
It was described to me as similar, so.
I hope they're not riding down Route 28.
Smuggler's Beach to Smuggler's Beach, and sort of an 8-town, sort of race
relay or something?
track.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
cool.
Like a relay or?
No relay. I mean,
Just
different, there's maybe a 10 or 20 mile, 50, I forget what the distances are, but, so September, looks like it's gonna happen.
Can they
so.
end up at the drive-in site? Would we be prepared to
They
have
want to end up at Smuggler's
guests?
Beach.
No, Smuggler's Beach.
Start and end at Smugglers in one day.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and it's on a Sunday, too, and it's in September. So, yeah, so that was the one new thing,
I
I
think
thought.
they're the old version of The Last Gasp. They've just taken.
Which doesn't exist anymore.
Doesn't exist
Yeah.
anymore, right.
Right, this is.
I think they ran with it, and this is, I forget what it's called, end of summer, something like that.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's how I
September,
got my
Peter?
wife.
September,
Yeah,
yeah,
oh, that's
on a
good.
Sunday.
On her shoulder.
She hit by a car in The Last Gasp. That's how we got together.
Did you hit her?
Do you have an update, Jim?
I do. So, The property located at 696 Route 28, previously known as the drive-in site. The Board of Selectmen, on a vote of 3-2, agreed to reconsider and then change the name to Parkers River Landing. So, and the other thing I want to tell you is that it's still not too late to buy a plank. Go on the town website, and you can buy yourself a nice little plank, 24 characters or less, $350 for an individual, $450 for a nonprofit, and $550 if you own a business. And it's a great way to memorialize somebody or yourself.
Great.
And Kathy can probably tell you more than I can about what's going on over there.
www.yarmouth.ma.us/planks. Planks with an S at the end.
There is also, by the way, a drone, if you go on the front page, you can click on I don't know how old that is, but it's,
Yeah, there's,
a lot more has been done since then. It's pretty cool.
I actually drove in there one day last week. I know I wasn't supposed to, but I drove down the road. They've done amazing work. They really have.
You can actually walk in, because I've walked in.
Huh?
If you think you're gonna get stopped, just park over at Captain Parkett, just walk across the street. and you
yeah, we're
can
not
walk in.
pushing that one. It's an active construction site.
It is, it is.
not
I'm
encourage-
not encouraging people to do that.
We will have a grand opening ceremony, and then you can all go walk it all you want. But stay away from that.
Anyone else on committee?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just capital budget, just as a heads up, we're meeting tomorrow to finalize our plan, thankfully, and have it ready for Board of Selectmen in their first meeting in March.
Okay, staff updates or any correspondence, Kath?
Yes. Route 6A, Village Centers, one of the things that kind of came out when we were asking for some additional design funds at the special town meeting was that some people felt like a wide range of town was not aware of some of these meetings that we had. So we have advertised and tried to get, put it, more social media, getting the word out that we're having a meeting next Wednesday night, the 26th, 6 p.m. here in the hearing room to kind of go over the concept designs for the Village Center, which is really from Gingerbread Lane to just east of Minden Lane, kind of where the banks and the lighthouse keepers and those types of businesses are located. We also did meet with Sarah Korjeff, who's the historic person from the Cape Cod Commission, as well as John Stewart, who's on Old Kings Highway, trying to get some ideas of making sure that when we're making these improvements to live in our modern times and address these functional issues, that we're not doing anything that would make it too jarring from a historical context. And I think a lot of it is in relation to the materials that we end up choosing for things. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that on the meeting on Wednesday, as well as present kind of the information that was already presented very well with the local businesses and the residents in the area, but now just kind of opening it up to a wider audience and the community in general and see how they feel about it.
Only because I did pay attention to the most recent one, Kathy. The crosswalk at Hallett's,
Yeah.
Say that.
Yeah.
it's going to stay there?
I think that that's something that we can talk about a little bit more. And one of the things I've asked the consultant to include is a little bit wider aerial, because there is an crosswalk that was put in just west of Vesper Lane.
Uh-huh.
So if we're going to move that one a little bit further down, maybe it's just west of Gingerbread Lane, and that might be something that might fit in. So I think right now we haven't changed that, but I think that's something that we would like to get some input on. How do you feel about it? Ultimately, Mass DOT, there's standards with regard to setting up crosswalks and the location and site distances, so they'll have some say in that. And you also kind of don't want to have a bunch, like
A
three
bunch
right
together,
together.
yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah.
if we can kind of make sure that they're somewhat paced out in a particular way, then that's certainly something that's still open for discussion. It might help with turning movements from in and out of Sandy Side Lane as well.
I just remember the comments. I think it was at special town meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, when
Yes, that comment's been made quite a bit, and that's certainly something that we can work at. But we did get the funding, and we are working with VHB in order to come up. We're going to have a pre-meeting. You kind of have like a meeting with all the honeycombs at Mass DOT and kind of get their input of this is what we're proposing. How do you all feel about it? So that they can work up and do what now is called a pre-25% design plans, which we're really kind of hoping at that phase we've kind of solidified some of these things, not just I mean, materials would still be up in the air, but definitely things like where the crosswalks would go and that type of thing. And that's certainly something we want to keep moving forward, so we're going to try and finalize that. So that's my one staff update, and the other one is, we did have a kickoff meeting with UMass Donahue on the short-term rental study.
Oh, good.
So they're going to be, their first thing is actually just kind of collecting a bunch of different data on the short-term rentals that we have in town, and also doing an analysis from DOR, as well as this thing called Air DNA, where you can kind of figure out a bunch of information and look at that. They're also going to be doing some interviews with different town staff, maybe some different organizations about that. And then they'll probably, at that point, will want to have some type of, what was mentioned was having some type of workshop meeting. And that might be something where the planning board gets invited, as well as, you know, a bunch of different organizations, to kind of get everybody and the select board together to kind of talk maybe a little bit more in detail about the results of the data, which you would love, the data. And then, so then we'll have that, and then their next step is to, like, looking at different ways that we might be able to either mitigate negative things that we've seen or enhance positive things that we've seen, and that type of thing. Because we did extend our short-term rental bylaw, which does have a sunset clause, extended it through November of 2026. But I'm hoping that this document here, or this final document, will help us a lot with how we might make any changes to it, or whether we want to just continue with what we have. So good work's being done there, and that's probably something that's going to happen. The workshop might happen in June, and maybe the final report by October. So they're working fairly quickly.
I know it was very, I'm sorry, Peter. I just know that they did great work and really helpful for Provincetown. And, you know, by having them do this report, Provincetown decided to put a cap on short-term rentals, which really all came about because of this report that came back. It was really eye-opening, so.
Will their data include the address of the STR license?
They got the information from DOR, which does include the actual addresses. But that doesn't include things like, you know, how much they rented it for. So that's where the Air DNA kind of comes in, to kind of get an idea of how it is. And they're trying to break it up into West Yarmouth, South Yarmouth, and Yarmouth Port, to kind of see which parts of town might be getting hit a little bit harder. I know that was something that the planning board was looking for.
If they have the DOR revenue from a particular address, you can figure out how much they basically were getting for a rate, because you can just back into the number, just take the tax rate, so.
Madam Chair, could I ask a quick question? Do you know if so one of my curiosities has been, how many people purchased properties and then made them short-term rentals? Is there a way to look at the purchase date and, you know, cross-reference when somebody applied for, so say I applied for a special permit for a short-term rental. Can we look at that special permit and look back and see when this person purchased the property? I'm always curious to how many people are actually out there just buying them up to
Revenue,
make them
for
that.
revenue, yeah.
And I think that would be a good, you know,
That's a little harder to identify. I think what they are also looking for some information from the assessor's department, so that they can find out, you know, what's the mailing address, so they can at least figure out whether somebody is a full-time resident or not, how many of these. I think what we were kind of hoping to get at, and I'm not sure if they can do that, but, okay, are these kind of things where this is a second home owner who's using it in the shoulder seasons and renting it out during the summer to kind of get some little incomes so that they can have that? Or is this someone coming in, buying up this property specifically as some type of, as a commercial entity? And that's one thing we were trying to get, to see if we can get enough information in order to try and glean a little bit from that.
because it should be very simple for them to say, all right, here's a special permit. I mean, all they do is look at the property record card. It says the date of sale.
There's no special permit.
I mean.
In the license.
The license to get,
Or whatever.
That's where it's,
not
yeah.
not a special permit.
Yeah, I think that gets a little bit difficult, because until OpenGov came in, which has only been active for like a year, they weren't tracking short-term rentals any differently than a seasonal rental. And a lot of times people don't understand that I'm renting my short-term rental out all summer long, so I'm seasonal. No, you're not. You're a short-term rental, even though it gives the definition. So how many people are actually hitting the right box? So it's trying to mesh all of that information. And unfortunately, I think moving forward, we'll have more information on our local level from OpenGov than we've ever had in the past. But people need to put in the right information, too.
Again, I just think it'd be interesting to see how many people are, we're always concerned about the investor. Well, maybe it's the, the
Well, every
boogeyman who
property
doesn't
owner-
exist.
Yeah, well, every property owner can be an investor. I mean, that's,
But I mean, typically, if you saw that somebody purchased a home in January, and then 4 months later, they put it on the market to rental, then that kind of tells you, hey, maybe this
bought it
person
for
bought it
revenue.
for
Yeah, they bought it
that
for revenue.
purpose, so.
But that still doesn't, what does that mean? I mean, it just,
Well, it tells us who's
Who's
buying
doing what?
properties for
Who's
an
doing what?
investment
Right,
purposes
right.
versus somebody who's buying it for,
Right.
like my condo that I have, I use it to ski and then I don't use it all
use it
summer
all.
long. And
Right. But the same logic actually will apply when we start looking at ADUs. How many people are buying a place with the, now that you don't have to rent it and then put an ADU on it and get more rental? That logic, using real estate either as housing or as an investment is just a big policy issue every town's got to grapple with. Because housing does two things. It's an investment, plus it's a place to live.
So Kathy, now that they know the address, and you mentioned they're going to work with the assessor's office, will they look at the assessed value as part of their analysis of each property?
I don't know exactly how detailed they're going to get into that. They love the numbers, so I would like to think that they would get as deep as they possibly can in analyzing that. The whole purpose is to find out what's happening and then what's the impacts of that.
Because my point, my thinking is that if you find a large percentage fall within an assessment of, we know what the median sale price is in Yarmouth, so, but if it falls within that, whatever the range is, $400,000 to $600,000, which is a first-time home
Oh, yeah,
buyer's
you did
range,
it, yeah.
right? Then we know the impact. They're actually taking properties off the market.
That's a good point.
That's a very good point.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I will relay that to them.
It's a really good point.
Kathy, who's the point person managing this contract?
Mary Wagon. It's actually being funded through the Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay.
And it was actually an item in the Housing Production Plan.
Yep.
A strategy in
Yep.
the Housing Production Plan.
So Mary's in charge?
Yeah, but we're working, Karen and I
Yeah,
are working.
oh, no, yeah.
She's spearheading a lot of it. She's doing a great job.
Anything else?
Kathy, can I just ask one follow-up question? This is an old business question. Do you remember when we had the people here that were doing the old Main Street, doing the street, and there was a lot of talk about the trees?
Yep.
And they promised to come back at some point and give us an update.
I think they came back, I did look at that recently because somebody,
Or then maybe they were going to submit something in writing about what,
Tree warden was gonna put
something,
together
right?
a group to meet with the residents before he started planting new
And the
trees.
residents were going to be on that group, correct?
Right.
Yeah. Did that happen?
no, it has not
It
happened.
hasn't happened yet,
They
okay.
have, I think,
still
2
digging up the
years,
streets.
yeah.
It's still
yeah.
still digging up the street, okay.
They have 2 years from when we did it, and I think it was last May that we might have done it, and then the trees need to be planted 3 years from, or a year after that's all, everything's
okay.
done. But yeah, no, that's something that's definitely, I have a little tickler on my calendar on that.
And then, of course, my favorite is Great Island.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
Something's going to happen because they're going to do something with the sidewalk because, the pipeline is coming down there. And the street's going to take, what is it, Jim, what is it? What did we hear the other night, 10 feet on either side? So,
it varies by property. It varies, by
not what we heard. We heard 10 feet, right?
it varies by
At the,
property.
yeah, that the presentation they gave at the selectmen's meeting,
Right.
it was 10 feet on either side.
They're not taking just a 10-foot strip on either side.
That's what we were told. That's the impression I got.
Well, then they've changed their right-of-way plans because there's
I
some,
could be
there's
wrong. Is that-
temporary easements that will be needed for like grading and stuff, but the permanent easements kind of, they only are taking what they need to take. They wouldn't want to take 10
Bike
feet when they
path.
don't need it.
Bike trail through the whole thing as well, so that's
Yeah,
gonna give
on
them-
the southern side, is it, and they increased it from
Maybe it's
8
just
foot
10
to
feet on the
10 foot.
southern side.
For the bike path.
I was under the impression it was 10 feet on either side as well,
I was too.
which I thought was pretty excessive.
Right, 'cause
That's
they
not what
talked
the
about.
preliminary right-of-way
then I
plans
must have-
show, unless they've changed their
Okay.
thinking. But there's the taking, and then there's like a big chunk for temporary. And a lot of that is, okay, you have a curb cut, we need to get in and grade into, and do your curb cut. So it's been,
That presentation, even though planning is not part of that project, was very illuminating. I thought, oh my, they're doing all this stuff, and basically the planning board doesn't know what they're doing because it's a highway project. But it is drastic, what they're doing from East Main Street up to Camp Street.
It is a lot.
Roundabout, not a rotary, it's a
Around, we were
roundabout.
corrected several times. But the impact on that strip is gonna be,
It's going to be dramatic.
oh, yeah. I mean, Chris Greeley did a very good, explanation about how are people at Hyannis Park gonna get out of their neighborhood? Because you can't get out on Wynwood now as it is, and when you make that like a speedway, plus I don't think they took into account on the north side of that street, from East Main to Camp Street, there are 8 curb cuts getting into the businesses along, and that's less than a quarter of a mile.
Camp
With
Street's
8
gonna be a
yeah.
right turn only.
One of the conversations was they were gonna make it, what my street? Or a right turn only street. So as you come out of Camp, you cannot turn onto, you have to turn right onto 28, you cannot turn left. The new, that store that used to be the painted furniture store, the unpainted furniture store, right there at
Mill
the,
store, the former mill
trying
store.
to make a left out of there now is gonna be almost impossible, because I think the Rotary's gonna be right there in front of the roundabout, is gonna be right there in front of them. I don't know, how developed these plans are, or whether we still have an opportunity, or the town's got an opportunity to comment, but some of the suggestions were really, you were at the meeting too, I think you heard
I
some of the
was,
stuff.
no,
weren't you?
I was sick that day and I
you?
didn't get a chance to go. But they already had their 25% public
Oh,
hearing.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're moving towards 75%.
Absolutely, and I was sitting there saying, oh, wow, this is really dramatic.
So what's gonna happen is Windward Way and Baxter Ave, which I grew up on, they're just gonna go through the back way and come out by the hospital. They
Yeah.
won't try to take a left turn anymore.
And that's exactly what the neighborhood doesn't want. They don't want to become
And
the
they're not gonna
the
stop
crutch.
it. That's
No.
what people will do.
It's like water. It's seeking its own level. But it was really a very illuminating presentation about what they're gonna do. The turning radius at the roundabout, how are you gonna get those huge trucks? Even Dorcas, I think, said something about, how am I gonna get a bus through there? So I don't know, they all seemed very pleasant, they all seemed to know what they were, but I don't think they actually ever stood on 28 and looked at the traffic between that light and Camp Street. They just didn't seem like they had a practical understanding about what goes on there, because no roundabout is gonna solve the problem of 8 left-hand turns off 28 in less than a quarter of a mile. And those are active. You got the coffee shop, you got the tattoo place, the mini golf place, the bakery, and the gas station. And then on this end, you got the language store and something else. There's something else next to the language store. And then the light, and they're gonna put a rotary in there. It just seemed like, they were like in La La Land.
Well, we shall see.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know how it's all gonna work, but they claim everyone loves them.
Okay, so, anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, motion to adjourn, please.
So
My
moved.
motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all.